After so many years of quarterback controversy, dating back even to the controversial days of Alex Smith, the 49ers fan base continues to be divided around the quarterback position, and it's just gotten unexpectedly worse. Maybe it's just time I stop expecting the quarterback controversy to end, but in this video, I've got the latest from an eventful week between the front office and the almost 2023 MVP, Brock Purdy. Hit subscribe if you're looking for daily 49ers content, but however this summer went, I did not expect the 49ers to do this. I expected the Niners to iron out a deal early, and technically that could still happen. I also expected Jed York. I took him at his word that he was going to pay, the 49ers were going to pay Brock Purdy top dollar. Well, this week, a lot happened surrounding quarterback Brock Purdy, and the story starts with Tim Kawakami earlier this week. And I'll continue on as we go into a bunch of other little details that came out this week, but let's just start here. This is what Kawakami said. I heard from a plugged-in NFL source this week that the 49ers and Brock Purdy's camp are indeed feeling like there won't be fireworks on the way to an eventual deal. But I've also heard generally that the framework might be a little different than some of the other recent quarterback deals. I suspect this means the 49ers could be pitching a shorter-term, lesser guaranteed deal compared to the full commitment deals signed by guys like Trevor Lawrence, Justin Herbert, and others over the last few years. Will Purdy and his agent be happy with that? Assuredly, there'll be some negotiations. Nobody makes their best offer right off the bat. It might take time. Now, again, after all these years, I shouldn't be surprised by this. But it seems to me, and this is the fear, and it could just be, my concern of history repeating itself, that the 49ers are going to let this thing drag on. There are still many people out there, to be fair, that are projecting that the deal gets done. Like Coach Yak on Twitter, for example, I believe said he believes it'll be done by June. Okay, that helps for sure. But it will be interesting to see how this plays out. If the deal's different, which is the projection right now, and I'm going to give you some other numbers in a minute on what another person from ESPN thinks, but if you look at, you can slice all these quarterback deals down a lot of different ways. Over the Cap has these kind of three main categories being average per year, so AAV, total guaranteed, and fully guaranteed. So just a quick look at fully guaranteed. Of course, Deshaun Watson shows very big on the the fully guaranteed, because total and full were the same. And I think that the Cleveland Browns they must have a ton of regret on that particular decision. But you can see in terms of fully guaranteed money, the rankings start with Deshaun Watson, but then you see like reasonable names at the top of the list, like Joe Burrow and Trevor Lawrence. Okay, I said reasonable. Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson. But whatever the case, if you look at just total guaranteed money, all right, Dak Prescott, of course, is the guy who's on top in terms of total guarantees. This is the number I think is going to be the most interesting around Brock Purdy, because AAV can be split, can be affected by a lot of different factors, but total guaranteed money really tells you how much are we making this guy, how much are we setting this guy up for life, right? How much game-changing, life-changing money is that player going to get? And that really tells you kind of where the front office feels Brock Purdy is. If the deal is not a Trevor Lawrence type of deal, so he has $200 million in total guaranteed money, then you're looking down lower in the Jalen Hurts, Jared Goff area of, 180 maybe or 170. I don't know. Do you go beyond that, down below the Jordan Loves in the 160s? What is the total guaranteed money for Brock Purdy going to be? That's going to be really interesting. I've heard some projections around the Kirk Cousins area of 100 million total guarantees. If it's a shorter term deal, then that's definitely the direction you're going to see that go. If it's not a 4-year deal, I think it's fair to say you're probably not going to see him much higher than the $100,000 mark, or $100 million, dollar mark. Now, if we go to AAV, which is a fair part of the conversation, although not a perfect part of the conversation by itself, that's the number that folks kind of tend to go to when we're talking about quarterbacks and where they rank and how much they're making on an annual basis. So if we're looking at AAV, which I think is a fair measurement, okay, in some respects, then where does Brock Purdy stand on that list for you? Because if he's, again, not going to be a Trevor Lawrence kind of guy who's in the 55, if he's not going to be up there, and remember back in the day, not that long ago, just a couple of months ago, it was in December, that the projection was supposed to be top of the market, which would be that Dak Prescott 60 million AAV. Is he going to get over 60 million? That so far, that contract for Dak Prescott, pretty much every contract for Dak Prescott, has not really looked quite right for the Dallas Cowboys, and I'm okay with that. No problem. You just keep doing that kind of stuff. It makes us all laugh. But then you've got Jordan Love at 55, Trevor Lawrence at 55, Joe Burrow at 55, and then Tua at 53, which was another one that I thought was kind of interesting. So if we're looking at not being that kind of player, then I think you're down in the Jalen Hurts, Kyler Murray area around the 50 mark. I cannot see the 49ers offering him less than that AAV. Personally, I just don't see the 49ers in that 45 range, although that is what a lot of folks have suggested. We'll have to wait and see how it all shakes out. It sounds like the 49ers right now, if Kawakami is, correct, his sources are correct, it sounds like the 49ers are pushing for Brock Purdy to be lower than expected, and it's definitely not money Brock Purdy is going to want to say yes to. Now, there is a fair conversation, and we're going to get to more details in a second, but there's a fair conversation here of who holds the cards, because I keep seeing the argument on both sides, and I don't see a lot of people in the middle. So obviously, the 49ers hold the cards in terms of being able to pay the guy. The 49ers hold the cards in terms of Brock Purdy not having a great season this last year and not being able to do it super, super well without all of his weapons. And I think that that's a genuine part of the negotiations. When Jed York said it, it was before the season started. So when Jed York is talking about splashing cash, maybe the splash in the cash doesn't look like a tsunami of cash. It looks more like a wave of cash, like a large wave of cash or something like that. Big swells, whatever you want to call it. As far as I'm concerned, that's that side of the argument. But the other side of the argument, of course, is that Brock Purdy is, he carries some of the cards in that if he does not sign a deal or if he holds out and says, I'm not going to play, which, that's what I'm sure that's what his agent is going to tell him to do. If he does that, he puts the 49ers in a really tight spot because they have to go out there and get somebody in the free agent market. Now, there are guys out there, but they're guys that are going to command a lot more money in terms of what's going to impact this next upcoming season than Brock Purdy is. And so the big fear for me is if you let that holdout play on and you let it go and let it go and let it drag and let it drag, the issue is you can survive if Brandon Aiyuk doesn't play for a few weeks and it takes a while for him to find his rhythm. You can't survive this situation if you don't have a starting quarterback. And if you don't splash for one of those free agent guys, then you're going to be left with, we have to pay Brock Purdy. If you do splash for one of those guys, you're not going to pay Brock Purdy because it doesn't make sense financially now. So now you're in a spot where whoever you do pick up as your big free agent guy has to be your guy forever going forward. So that's where things get really, really messy, in my opinion. You're not just going to go out there, and I don't want the 49ers to go out there and get a Sam Darnold or a Kirk Cousins because I think that decision with the money involved in it becomes a permanent decision. It has to, because you can't afford to do something other than that. So you offer them some 1-year deal and try to survive the season, but you're not going to pay Brock Purdy at that point. That's just my gut. You let me know what you think in the comments on that one, but we have to keep going because the story is not over. It does get more interesting. ESPN's Dan Graziano believes that Purdy's extension will likely be structured similar to Daniel Jones' contract with the New York Giants. Jones signed a 4-year, $160 million deal with the Giants back in March 2023 that included $92 million in total guarantees. So Purdy's deal would be for more money to account for inflation. So again, putting you around what I said earlier of that $100 million in total guarantees range. Is that a 4-year deal? Do they sign Brock to a 4-year deal? That's an interesting one. If it's a 3-year extension, $100 million in guaranteed, I think they might be able to get that deal over the line, and that's a total of 4 more years of Brock Purdy. But you definitely have your way out. So the deal does make sense from an organization perspective in terms of your commitment to the quarterback. However, if you have some concerns. However, I don't know if that's a deal Brock Purdy is going to take, having had the 2023 he had. Graziano's prediction is Purdy will end up signing a 4-year, $196 million extension with $112 million. So I was wrong, $112 million guaranteed. The $49 million average annual salary would rank 10th among all current quarterback contracts, putting him between Jalen Hurts and Kyler Murray. Now, this is the prediction of what will end up happening per Graziano. That's where we get kind of some interesting land here. So that means that what the 49ers would be offering him before that would be less, around that $100 million mark, which is where my head was going earlier. And that means that Brock Purdy would say, no, I'm not taking that deal. So the prediction from Graziano is a 4-year extension. So 5 more years of Brock Purdy with 112 guaranteed. This is a really interesting one. I think AAV wise, and I can go back to that graphic real quick. AAV wise, $49 million, putting you below Jalen Hurts, above Kyler Murray, is a really interesting place. Okay, in that 50 mark, I would say 49ers fans would probably, let me know in the comments, but I feel like that would be something, if that happened, we'd all feel okay about that. We would feel like, hey, you did not completely destroy the quarterback market for a guy that last year had some concerns. I'm like a Brock Purdy fan. I want to be clear. Like I'm a diehard. My kids love Brock Purdy. I love Brock Purdy. But I do understand the concerns around the fully guaranteed money, the total guarantees, all that good stuff. Okay. So let's go ahead and move on then beyond what Dan Graziano said. And let's talk about one of the issues with Brock Purdy this season, because I think these competing ideas or potential competing ideas are part of where this conversation is kind of interesting. So when we look at what, my goodness, what we look like Steve Young has been saying all season, goodness, that took me way too long. When we look at what Steve Young was saying throughout the season, I think it was kind of interesting as he talked about Brock Purdy needing to run more, okay? Now, I put a question mark on competing ideas. I'm not 100% confident that these are competing ideas. I think that there might not be, but it doesn't really matter if they're competing. The ideas are interesting. So here on one hand, you have Steve Young saying, Brock Purdy's got to go out there and he's got to make it happen. He needs to go make things happen with his legs. He needs to put more pressure on defenses by making it harder to scheme against, all that good stuff. And Joe Montana this week came out and said something differently. He, speaking to the Chronicle, Montana cited injuries to fellow teammates as a context for Purdy's regression, then said he's going to be fine. He makes great decisions. Someone probably needs to talk to him and settle him down. When you start forcing things, it's hard. To that, I think we can all agree that makes a lot of sense. Continuing on, it seemed like Brock was feeling pressure to make plays because of the injuries. It's hard to see everything on TV, but sometimes I didn't even see receivers in the picture. To me, that's forcing it, especially a couple of key interceptions toward the end of the season. We saw that. In that sense, Montana is asking Purdy to not try and be the hero on offense. And what I think is interesting to me is that what Steve Young is asking of Brock Purdy, in my eyes, is kind of asking him to be the hero. Not totally the hero, but asking him to go out there and make it way harder to play against him and be the guy. Go out there and be the leader. Yes, sling the ball, yes, but also get out there and run the ball. And my fear with Brock Purdy running the ball, despite the fact that I do think that was an impactful thing in the 2023 playoffs, and I do think it was impactful this season at many times, I think overall the ends justified the means for Brock Purdy when he ran the ball. He had a couple situations where you're like, come on, dude, what are you doing? I'm thinking about like some scrambles that happened where he got sacked. I was at the Arizona Cardinals game this year. It was like week 5 or whatever, and I remember him doing that as well and just being like, dude, sometimes you just have to throw it away. Just throw it away. You already scrambled. You're already out of the pocket. You're not, getting an intentional grounding. Just throw the ball away, whatever. That seems like an easy decision. And I would worry a little bit that that's one of the areas where he's trying to be the hero. Now, maybe it's not a competing idea in the sense that Joe Montana is saying you're trying to be the hero in the way you're throwing the ball and in the plays you're trying to make with your arm that are just not there. And that I would agree. The fear, of course, being, can Brock Purdy go back to 2023 himself, even when there are injuries? Can he go back to his relaxed position in the pocket where he's making great decisions, he's getting the ball out of his hands in his first couple reads, and we're moving the ball up and down the field? I felt like this season we moved the ball pretty well up and down the field, but when we got to the red zone is where we ran into issues, and the 49ers were good in the red zone before Christian McCaffrey. Like they can survive without Christian McCaffrey, but this season it didn't look like we could. It didn't look like we could get it over the line without Christian McCaffrey. Now, to be fair, you take Brandon Aiyuk out of the mix as well, and so you've got both of those guys playing a role in that factor. And when even before Aiyuk got injured, he had at least two that I can think of, big drops. One of them that was in the end zone, and one of them that would have got them into the red zone. All of that to say, let me know what you think in the comments about this one. How do you think the 49ers need to structure this deal? I know that this is not a topic we're going to talk about every single day on this channel because I learned last year with the Brandon Aiyuk stuff, I just got tired of it, man. I just wanted to see it done. I wanted it to be over so we could move on and really focus on the season. And so I'm really, really hoping the Niners are not going to hold this out or let this go held out the way that it happened last time. But I think it's going to be really telling in April if they don't have a deal on the line yet. What is going to happen, because the 49ers have a really short window. If they're going to move on from Brock Purdy, which they don't want to do, but if they're going to move on from him, they have a short window to get it done. So it'll be interesting to see behind the scenes how far apart are these two competing perspectives. Brock Purdy's agent and the organization, how far apart are they? Because if they're not relatively close, then it's an issue. And if they are relatively close, get the deal done. Get it done, please. Pay him, and let's move forward for the next several years with Brock Purdy as our QB1, and let's just plan accordingly. If they are far apart, it's going to get really nasty, and I think the 49ers have an unexpected problem on their hands because I did not see many of these things coming.